People are strange. Something strange.
Is that strange?
That is strange.
That is strange.
Wow, that is strange.
This is strange.
And welcome back to Strange Sauna, everybody. Today is going to be an absolute steamer of an episode. We have Ryan Gable back on the show. Ryan, we were just talking before the show started. Haven't had you on for 2 years or so. So, you know, I hope everything's going all right. And I know that you're still doing shows about symbolism. I listened to your show with Clyde Lewis. You guys went deep into Super Bowl. You do this every year. How long have you been doing this?
I think I've been doing it for close to 13, 14 years, but with Clyde, probably about 6 or 7.
Right. So you're the granddaddy when it comes to Super Bowl symbolism. You know what you're doing.
Humbly, I like to think that.
Well, you're not the only one that thinks that. So, I mean, I think that you're one of the best, if not the best, at breaking this stuff down. So thank you so much for coming on the show. So Super Bowl LIX happened in the Caesar Dome in New Orleans. We had a lot of kind of weird situations happen with New Orleans at the beginning of the year, right? You had that massacre where the man ran over a bunch of people, right? Bringing a bunch of emotion, death, tragedy. Then you have the weird plane crashes that kind of link together Philadelphia and Kansas, right? That's just odd. And then you have the event itself where, you know, Trump attends the Super Bowl. This is the first sitting president to attend the Super Bowl. He actually went to a Super Bowl 33 years before this in 1992. And then this was, you find out, Andy Reid, his 33rd year of coaching football. So there's just a lot of numerology involved in stuff. So give us your take. What do you think about the whole thing? And take it away.
Well, again, thank you for having me on the show. And I appreciate you having listened to my show. And I know that you listened, like you said, to Ground Zero. So what you said was, I think, a good summary already. There are a lot of strange, for lack of better terms, coincidences or synchronicities, or maybe another word applies to the plane crashes, to shootings, bombings, etc., and the Super Bowl in particular. We could start probably with the mundane. You mentioned Trump goes to the Super Bowl, and he sits, as you would assume, at the top, lots of security, mostly away from everybody. And Trump is sitting directly across from where I'm guessing he's somewhere near the top. He's sitting across from the top of the arena or the stadium that has this giant Caesar head with laurel leaves, because it is, as you said, Caesar's Superdome. And funny enough, one of the first commercials I saw on my Tubi feed was for a Caesar's pizza. Pizza.
Oh,
one of the first ads I saw. So, yeah, Trump's sitting there, and you have this Caesar Superdome. And then you have, at the halftime performance, just one little random thing. When they're walking around the circle, dancing, they do the Roman salute, very similar, if not identical, to what Elon Musk did and got criticized heavily for. You can watch in the video, they'll go like this to the heart. For those of you who are watching, they go like this to the heart, and then they put their arm out. So they're putting their heart or their soul out to the people that are watching. And that's what they call that the Roman salute. Some scholars might argue against it or for it. There's a lot of debate as per what it actually was. Is it just from paintings? Did they actually do that, etc.? But it's generally known as the Roman salute. Okay, so you've got the Roman salute. You've got the Roman, literally the Caesar Roman laurel leaf top of the stadium. You've got Trump sitting across from that. And among so many other things, you have these bizarre historical connections. So Trump, when he took office a second time, his inauguration, he said, I'm sure you guys remember this, he said that there's a lot of stuff we're going to do as Americans, but the big thing was that we're going to be respected again, and we're going to restore America.
Right.
And then he said something that, well, I don't like this idea at all, but he said we're going to expand America's borders, right?
Right. Yeah.
Well, those are two specific things, not random things. Those are two really specific things that he says. One's kind of general, the other one's very, particular. And those are literally, if you go onto the internet and go to, say, the World Encyclopedia of Mythology, probably any encyclopedia, World Mythology Encyclopedia, you can find an entry for Pax Romana, P-A-X Roman A Romana, which means the Roman peace. And if you read what the Roman peace was, it was prior to Julius Caesar being assassinated, Rome was in shambles. And after he was assassinated, Octavius, his adopted son, avenges his death and then eventually goes and is able to defeat in one way or another the other rivals for the throne. So Octavius takes the throne and becomes Augustus, which is a title, or Augustus Caesar. These are both titles. And the first thing he says is that we're going to restore Rome and we are going to expand Rome's borders. Now, why that's connected to Trump in any way, shape, or form, it's not some random connection, is because Pax Romana, the peace of Rome or the Roman peace, was considered, not in my words, but in the history books, the golden age of Rome.
There it is.
Where Augustus says, I found Rome a pile of bricks. I'm paraphrasing. I left it a city of marble. Well, this is precisely, as I just explained, what Trump plans to do. And this is his plan. It's like quite literally the plan of Augustus. Now, this is the interesting thing to me. Augustus did, in a sense, save Rome, but he did it with total dictatorial power. And he became so immensely, I guess we could say popular, but more so, he became so immensely influential that eventually any free element of government turned over all their control to him. And this is where the Roman imperial cult started, where not only did he, but his successors as well, essentially became worshipped as gods. Yeah, they became deities.
I was going to ask you, sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to...
no, of course.
Did they willingly do this? This was... they loved him so much that they were like, hey, this guy is standing up for us, so we're going to willingly give whatever we have to this man and let it roll.
Well, yeah, so if we're going to be objective and look at the context of it, obviously Rome was a vast empire, and obviously you're going to have people that didn't want to be a part of the empire one way or the other. A lot of people that did. People have different opinions just like they do today. But generally speaking, yes, people really loved this guy. Even though he was, in a lot of ways, he was a tyrant, but he was also a savior of Rome, which is really the point that I'm trying to get at, and the point I got at on my show on the Secret Teachings, is that what we're looking at here is, yes, the people loved him. Yes, in a sense, he wasn't like elected or anything, but in a sense, like he had the power of democracy behind him, the power of the people behind him. And the thing is, he didn't rule as a Republican leader. He ruled as a dictator. And this is the problem that I have with Trump. It's one thing to say the things that he says and to do, and people are excited about Doge and all. I'm not really concerned with it. I'm concerned with whether or not the power of the presidency is being wielded as a tool of Republican values, or if it's being wielded as a tool of dictatorship. Right. And when you rule not by the Constitution and not by the laws of the land, and you rule by executive action, that's exactly what Augustus did.
Right.
And people were so happy that Augustus was in power and putting Rome first, in essence, putting Rome first, they were willing to give up all of those other things. They were willing to give up their freedoms, in a sense. They were willing to give up all the Republican values that made Rome truly great to begin with. So the point is, you can see this parallel between Octavius or Octavianus or Augustus and Trump. And then you look at the Super Bowl and you see the Caesar head, which is, again, a general title. You see Trump essentially right across from it, which made me think of Gladiator. Right. I was waiting for them to say the Eagles won the Super Bowl, and then it pans up to Trump, and Trump puts his fist up with his finger out, his thumb, and just goes, no, the Chiefs won. Just like in the Gladiator movie, right? And then you have the Roman salute on the field and so on and so forth. So those are, in my opinion, those are kind of mundane to more occult connections, but they're also historical connections that show you that history, whether you call it rhyming or repeating, there's something going on there. I don't know what it is, but there's something at the very least, peculiar about this Roman connection, especially because Trump, of course, said that this is the golden age of America.
Dude, there's so much there with the golden age. I mean, we've done episodes where there's so much symbolism. I mean, who ruled the golden age? Who was the god of the golden age? It was Saturn, right? And the whole hexagon and Saturn worship, you see it all throughout. Even the Super Bowl, the commercials, you had hex clade. They actually, I have a clip of that. We can look at that later. But they have an egg that's literally shaped like Saturn. You know, it's like, what are we doing here? And when you look at the Super Bowl, though, I mean, football in general, it's in a dome like a gladiator dome. You know what I mean? And with the Super Bowl, you have the Roman numerals, literally just hitting the nail on the head. And the Caesar dome. And you have Trump attending first ever in the Caesar dome. It's just like there's so much symbolism there, you know?
As the golden age president, and quite literally as the orange man, or the orange yellow man, they call him.
Right, yeah.
Which is just another layer to the whole thing. Yeah, so there's I refer to it as a Roman ritual. I called my show Win in Rome. But it's like kind of like a Roman ritual, which is what the gladiator sport was. It really was a ritual to keep people satiated. And I mean, it wasn't just that, but if we're talking in slightly more than superficialities, that's essentially what it was, especially during the time of Augustus and the later emperors that ruled Rome. So, and that's the thing that I guess we could add this. The thing that also concerns me, if we're talking about it from a historical point of view, is that if you have a dictator you can have a good dictator and a bad dictator in a sense. So you can have someone like Augustus who really was a good dictator because he did save Rome. And I'm not a fan of any political representative for the most part, minus a handful. But like Trump might, quote, save America, but that doesn't mean, again, he's ruling by the rule of law. Which is the problem, because what that means is the next president can just use executive orders to overturn everything Trump did, just like he's going to overturn everything Biden did. Yeah. And this is exactly what happens in Rome, where you get someone who is a psychopath and they completely deplete the treasury and they ruin Rome. And then the next person that takes power, usually after a few months to a few years, they didn't last very long, they might try to restore Rome. I mean, there were many emperors that tried to restore the republic, like to go back to the actual republican principles, and they were assassinated by the Praetorian Guard. Or the senators tried to restore order, and the Praetorian Guard surrounded them and said, well, you can keep your head, or you can put this person that we want to put in power. And that's what's happening in America, I think. And we can scream about democracy and all the other things we scream about, but we're following in those same footsteps historically. And the ritual aspect of it is, you might have heard people say this, but when a society starts to lose its way, when a civilization starts to lose its purpose and its values, it tends to turn to barbaric practices, and it tends to turn to things like human sacrifice, and it tends to turn to things that are usually darkly, what's the word? Maybe dark, maybe occult, in a bad way, not a good way. Right. And I think that in a lot of ways, that's what the Super Bowl ultimately is. It's a Super Bowl. It's a giant bowl that we pour all this energy into, and that's maybe the next level of this whole thing.
So what do you think it is about the energy? So that's one, I try to look at this from, we have friends, I have other shows where, like the other host of the show doesn't believe in any of this stuff. So it's like, what do you tell people that go, dude, it's just a game? Like, the energy, all this ritual underlying esoteric, exoteric, that's bananas. This is just a game. So what do you say to them, and like, how do you convince them methodically in a real way here?
That's a really good question. And it's something that I ponder myself. I'm thinking, how do I convince people of this? And then I start to think, I'm not really trying to convince people. I'm not trying to get people to believe what I'm saying. I'm simply pointing out that there's usually more to the story. That's what I would, I tell people. But if I'm sitting down trying to show someone that there is more to it, I would say, starting off again on the kind of mundane level, how much do companies pay to run an advertisement? $8-10 million. It used to be like $1 million or $2 million. Now it's like $8 to $10 million to run an advertisement, 30 seconds, 1 minute, whatever. that's a lot of money. They don't put that money into the commercial because nobody's watching. They're putting that money into the commercial because, well, like half the country watches. And a lot of people around the world watch the Super Bowl. I think there was like 135 million people that watched it. And that's just initially watching it. That doesn't count for the people that listened to it. Doesn't account for people that went back and watched it again, or the people overseas. This was just in the United States, 135 million people. That's a lot of people. Mm-hmm. So you've got the advertising aspect of it in simple terms, and you have the political side of things. It's obviously a platform. You saw commercials that were highly politicized, that were very racial, among other things. So it's a platform to push ideas. If I had $10 million just sitting around, I might put the secret teachings into an advertisement because I know how many people are watching and how many people, might end up coming to my show because of that. So that's the baseline. That's the mundane part, I think, of why it matters and why it's more than just a game. It obviously isn't just a game because it's the big game. It's the game. Every NFL fan, for the most part, tunes into this, and then everybody gets sad that the NFL season's over, and you got to wait a few months for this other league to start, and then for the NFL to start again in the fall.
It's like a cathartic moment, right? It's a release of all this energy.
Yes, it is. And so once you get past the commercials and the political aspects of all this stuff, then you get to the more occult stuff. And my opinion is, if you as an individual would put $1 million, $10 million into a commercial for, I don't know, pizza, or a commercial for a frying pan. Well, there are people in the world. We saw one of them in the stands of the stadium, an Eagles fan poking Patrick Mahomes' voodoo doll.
Yes.
There are people like that even at the NFL level. A lot of folks don't know that the New Orleans Saints, who play in the Superdome, when they entered the league, I think it was in 1967, they had not won, I think it was a playoff game. They had not won a playoff game in all 33 of those years, something like that, I was reading. And in 2000, the Saints actually hired a voodoo priestess to conduct a voodoo ritual at the Superdome because they found out, oops, it was built on top of a cemetery. So even the NFL or specific teams will engage in occult practices if they believe it helps their team, just like people do. I don't want to wash my jersey. Yes, there's the voodoo doll.
Yeah, sorry to
I don't want to wash.
Go ahead and keep on talking. I'm just going to be playing stuff here in the background.
Keep that one rolling.
Nuts.
Yeah.
Jeez.
So people don't wash their jersey. I mean, I don't even like football that much. I like hockey, but I have a ritual every year. I make a bowl of guacamole. I make, a specific kind of food, and I'm usually just cutting it for the kickoff. I get my whole day finished up, and then I get my food and I sit down. And every Super Bowl, it's the same way. I'm sitting down like right at kickoff. To me, that's a ritual to me. And that's all that a ritual is just an order of doing something. So when you get prepared for your show, you get prepared for work, you get prepared to go to the movies, whatever, go on a date, that's all ritual. Ritual just means an order by which you do something. So it's like a plan. And so if you define ritual that way by the dictionary definition, the whole Super Bowl is a ritual because the whole thing has to be planned. The halftime show especially is a huge ritual because you have to script every aspect of that. So you know who's moving where the stage is going to be, when the lights are coming on, who's moving, who's speaking, etc. I mean, just the base definition of those words like ritual and occult, which means hidden, well, the planning for that is hidden. So it is by definition ritualistic and occult. If we're going to go into the more esoteric components of that, then we can start looking at the symbols and the other things that you see in the commercials. I guess more so probably like themes than symbols, but you see themes in the commercials like robots, ChatGPT, Starlink, and then you see certain symbols at the halftime show with the four I call them the PlayStation symbols in the square, and then the relationship. Yep, exactly, and the relationship that has with those commercials, and there's a direct connection with the themes in the commercials and with the halftime show stage and imagery. And when you put it all together, I don't stretch for things. I'm just sitting down looking at what I'm watching. I'm like, okay, well, that symbol represents that represents that represents that. Okay, well, we have a pattern here. This all actually means the same thing, just objectively in symbol dictionaries. So there's a pattern here. Someone had to have planned this in some capacity to look this way, to impart this specific meaning to the subconscious or the unconscious. That's my opinion about the whole thing.
So what kind of symbols were you seeing during this year's Super Bowl, and how did the halftime symbols, the square, triangle, X, circle, how did those map to the commercials?
Yeah, so I'm not sure how many people watch as opposed to listen, but for viewers, can you put that image back up on the screen?
Sure.
Thank you. So for anybody who might not know what the stage looked like, it's basically a square, and there's 3 columns and 3 rows, and there's 9 boxes inside the square.
Correct.
Okay, so first of all, if you were to look up, and maybe you can look this up separate, the magic square of Saturn. The magic square of Saturn has 9 individual spaces in it, and the numbers that are in it, if you horizontally and vertically put them together, you get the number 15 each way. 15, 15, 15 vertical, 15, 15, 15 horizontal. And in numerology, that's 666, which is carbon, proton, neutron, electron, and that's the mark of man. We are carbon-based life forms. So that square accurately represents the physical material world, which is why Saturn, the Golden Age god, is a god who typically, especially when he's associated with the devil or El Diablo in the tarot card, he sits on, or he has somewhere around him, a black cube, because this is the 2-dimensional layout, and then the 3D projection of that is the 7 days of creation. I guess what I'm trying to say in terms that maybe are more clear is that if you think about that magic square of Saturn, what you're seeing on the screen, from the point of view of the whole thing being a singular point in space, and then you draw 7 lines out from that 8th point, you get a cube. So that square is actually what the Greeks would call ogdoad. They call it ogdoad. It's Ogdoad. And the ogdoad is the place, not of the creator with the capital C, but the place of the lowercase c creator. And it's the realm of a god in Egypt named Kek. Does that sound familiar?
Yes. Yeah, I wanted to do an entire show on Kek.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, go for it.
So Kek is, well, first of all, Elon Musk called himself Lord Kekius Maximus, which is also a Romanesque title. And he said that probably because it was something to do with a Bitcoin type thing he had, to kind of troll the political left because of the Pepe the Frog meme. The Pepe the Frog meme and Lord Kekius Maximus both are openly discussed, not my opinion, they're openly discussed in even mainstream news articles as being Kek, the god of the abyss, or the Ogdoad. And he is aligned with, Plato referred to him as Demiurgos, the creator of the physical world, which is Saturn. And that's the 8th point. And out of that 8th point comes 7 days of creation, 7 other points, which create the 3-dimensional world that we live in. So what we're looking at with the Super Bowl stage is quite literally the 2-dimensional blueprint of the 3-dimensional world as it is coming out of the Ogdoad. We're talking about geometry, we're talking about mathematics, we're talking about occultism, mythology, and many other things. Kekius Maximus, the frog god.
The Pepe.
He is also Baal, or Bel, or Melech.
Well, and there's this whole thing about meme magic and mimetic magic, and Trump using Pepe the Frog, the god of chaos. I mean, is Kek the god of chaos? Is he one of the gods of chaos, or?
Well, so there's a duality in Egypt. So you have multiple sets of deities that create balance. It's kind of like in the Hindu Trimurti, Brahma, Shiva, Vishnu. So you have a creator, destroyer, and a balancer of it all. That's kind of what you have in any theological, mythological system. You have a positive, negative force, the duality. So Kek is one of the forces that balances out, good and evil, dark and light. And because of that balance and that binary, that's what allows for there to be the stability for that 2-dimensional blueprint too. And this isn't me explaining this like, hey, this is my opinion. This is like Plato. We're talking this idea, this concept is thousands of years old. These symbols are pretty universal anywhere you look in the world. Some of them come out of specific magical systems or occult practices, But generally speaking, to answer your question, what you're seeing on the screen when you're watching the Super Bowl halftime show is you're looking at the magic square of Saturn. And then when you see that there's 4 symbols, one in each of the corners of that square, there is a square, a circle, an X, and a triangle. And they represent many things, but the simplest thing is that they are the 4 elements. So the X is fire, and in fact, the X at the games were red. It was a red X, so we know that is fire. We know the circle is air because it moves freely. The triangle and the square, the triangle is typically, if it's upside down, it's a symbol of water or the womb, and then the square is, well, it's obviously the earth. It's what I just described, the physical material world. So in those 4 symbols, you have the 4 elements. Now, if you look at a PlayStation controller, PlayStation, you guys play PlayStation?
Yeah.
Ever play PlayStation?
Yep.
Well, those are the symbols, right?
Exactly, yeah.
On the controller. Now, again, this is not me. I looked up these symbols just to see what Sony says that they represent. And it's all math and geometry. So the guy that invented the symbols, or he didn't invent the symbols, but he invented the layout and what they wanted to use for the PlayStation. The guy that invented that says that he chose these specific symbols to represent the PlayStation because at the time, the PlayStation, of course, was this big advance in technology. And it was like very complex at the time, 3D gaming. And so those symbols combined together, he said, represent the 3D world that Sony built. And each individual symbol represents one element of the world. For example, the triangle, he says, represents sight. The square represents the blueprint, which is what I just explained, the 2D blueprint. And the X and the O in Japan and in most countries represents yes and no. Or no and yes, respectively. So yes, no, binary. The triangle is what we can see, and the square is the blueprint of the world that we interact with. All of that is coming from Sony and the guy that literally developed and designed the PlayStation logo with these particular symbols. And in fact, he even had pushback against it and said, no, these are the symbols I want. This represents the Sony PlayStation. Okay, so you put all that together, and you're looking at, again, a long list of things that, whether it's from Sony, it's from a symbol dictionary, or it's from just basic standard, I guess you could call it, Wiccan earth-based religious practices with the symbols of what the triangle, right side up is the phallus, downward is the womb, right side up with a line through the top is air because air is above, and then downward with a line at the bottom is earth because earth is below. And you put all those symbols together, what do you get? You get the hexagram, which is the star of Saturn. So this is not accidental. And then last thing is, within that world, that 2D blueprint is the physical world that we live in and our conception of as above, so below. In other words, heaven, earth, and hell. The 3 worlds within the 3-dimensional world within the 2D blueprint out of the Ogdode. So what we're looking at here, if you take the 4 elements and the 3 worlds, once again, you get the number 7. And this, again, is not me. This is like very basic occultism. And you find it in pretty much any magical formula, magical society throughout at least Western history. There's a slightly different conception of it in the East. But in Western civilization, you find that these concepts are pretty universal.
Gotcha.
I think it's fascinating. I feel like a lot of people have missed those little details.
Yeah, and I mean, even with Donald Trump, the number 7 is all around him. I don't have the notes on me right now, but I've done several episodes on just the numerology surrounding Donald Trump, and the number 7 is just all over the place, especially when it comes to his acquaintance with Israel. There's a lot of 770, 777, that type of stuff.
What's on their flag, too? The Star of Saturn, the Star of Remphan is on their flag.
Right, the 6-pointed star, right? So as above, so below, like you were saying. What about this? Some people were pointing this out where it kind of looked like the Freemasonic apron. because the triangle doesn't go down all the way to touch the edge of the square here. It's kind of how you would see an envelope almost, you know?
Well, we could, again, being objective, you could look at it a couple of ways. On my show, I said if you were sitting on the other side of the stadium, it would have been a right side up triangle.
Correct.
Right. So it's a matter of perspective. If you were sitting on the other side, it might appear as if the tip, the apex, is touching the square.
Like a pyramid.
If you were looking at it from the other side. Mm-hmm. But, okay, so I'm actually really glad that you brought this picture up, because I don't think I showed this in the video presentation that I did. I just showed a general layout of the stage. But in this picture, you have the upside down triangle. There's a blue light. It's in witchcraft, it's water. And in general occultism, it's water. It's the womb. And it's what you use if you're trying to invoke something. Now, that doesn't mean a spirit. That just means it could be an idea. You're trying to invoke something. You're trying to bring it into existence. Could be a golem, could be an egregore, a thought form, etc.
Whoa.
But what I noticed that was really peculiar, and this blew my mind, Lady Gaga, who performed a benefit song at the beginning of the game before it started.
Right.
She was also promoted throughout the game as the Abracadabra singer. Did you guys hear that?
Yes.
She's Abracadabra.
Yep.
Well, Abracadabra, I don't know what you guys know about it, or your listeners, or even my listeners. I don't really talk about Abracadabra. It's kind of like a pop culture kind of cartoonish thing, right?
Right.
Well, abracadabra has always been used as a talisman to cure disease. So you write abracadabra, and then you reduce it on the next line down to bracadabra, and then you keep reducing it until you get nothing. So you're bringing the disease down, and you're reducing the disease. So it's a talisman for protection against that, against any kind of disease or demons or whatever. But this is the really weird thing to me. Abracadabra is usually written in an upside down triangular form, because you're bringing, you're reducing things down. And Lady Gaga sings this Abracadabra song. Personally, I like Lady Gaga because of what she incorporates into her music. And I read the interview that she did about that song that was promoted during the Super Bowl. She literally said, you could look this up, type in ELLE magazine, Lady Gaga Abracadabra. She literally says in the interview about the song that they have a spell that's put in the song. She's asked about the red lady in the song that she describes as that opposite part of yourself, that, kind of like the devil on your shoulder. And she says that the song is meant to represent the hardships of life and struggling with all these problems that you have. And that's what it represents to her. Now, I watched the video. I don't think it's really dark or anything like that. I actually think it's kind of got a positive message, as a matter of fact. But the song is about invoking that part of yourself, and it's about getting rid of those other voices in your head in very simple terms. So you take Abracadabra, mix it with the Super Bowl, and you've got this triangle that I think is one of the things people pointed out the most of the symbols from what I've seen. And that's how the Abracadabra is written. And it's used as a symbol of protection against dark forces and a symbol of protection against disease. So when you combine that with all the Trump stuff and the Rome stuff, there's an invocation happening here. And the invocation, as far as I'm concerned, is the building of the new Rome, as Elon Musk called America. The building of the new Rome, the new Augustus, the new leader, to expand the borders, to make America great. But as we were talking about before the show started, at the expense of the republic, at the expense of liberty, and the benefit and the favor of a foreign country, among so many other things. So that's my assessment. That's what I personally think. I can tell you I'm not 100%, covering every detail, but that's what I think initially.
Well, and I heard on one of your shows, you talked about sports and spells, right? And Lady Gaga, she put out this TikTok where she's kind of doing this crazy dance down a hallway.
Yes.
She's saying, going into the Super Bowl like Abra Unana. And that reminded me of Inanna, right? Ishtar, isn't that is that a 6-point star or is that an 8-point star? I don't know, but it reminded me of that.
The Inanna star is usually 8 points.
Okay.
Because it relates to the 8-spoked wheel. So the solstices, equinoxes, and the midpoints.
So what do you think she
Usually.
meant by this Abra Unana?
Well, Inanna is a lot of different things. I mean, she's a goddess of fertility. She's a goddess of love, a goddess of war. So you can invoke her for all of those different things, right? So if you're for love, for war, for fertility. So fertility would, I think, fit into, the theme here. We're talking about invoking something, bringing something into existence. In order to do that, you have to make sure you have a fertile, well, in this case of the triangle, it's literally a fertile womb,
Right.
for the invocation of something. So, and that's the thing about a lot of these deities, they have different meanings, right? So you have to look at the context of how those types of things are associated. So yes, it's a good question. I did not mention that on my show, but Inanna, she would be fertility in this sense. That's how I would interpret it. She's also the goddess of divine law. And the divine law comes from the golden age of Saturn.
Oh boy.
So those are different things that, I think those are adequate things to answer your question.
Right. Well, I'm glad
there's a
you brought that
connection
up because fertility is something that I've heard on other channels too. I don't know if you've heard of Donut or followed Donut, but he talks about this whole thing being a fertility ritual, like the halftime dance. The people all dressed up in white represent sperm. And like when you go back and you watch Rihanna when she was pregnant, she dressed up like as the egg, the morphic egg, where she was colored in, or she was wearing like a yellow yolk, and she was standing in a spotlight in the center, so it looked like an egg. She was the yolk of the egg. And before the Super Bowl, I mean, speaking of Lady Gaga, Easter eggs.
There's the red lady.
Right. And but you had all of these things referencing eggs. Fans react to Kendrick Lamar's Super Bowl PlayStation Easter egg. You had women kept as slaves on a human egg farm with the egg mafia. You had this Enron egg, which was a parody on this nuclear reactor that you could have at your home or your house to power your house for 10 years. And then you have this egg-shaped UFO that happened all before the Super Bowl. So it's like they're kind of getting the egg ready to hatch almost.
Yeah, and it's a thing that happens every year. So I mean, if we're going to look at this, I think in an objective way, we have to think back to the time of Inanna, because in the time of Inanna in the Mesopotamian region, the kings would have these fertility rituals. There would usually be a physical sexual encounter between the king and the queen, or the king and whoever was selected as a representative of the goddess Inanna, and they would have sex as a representation of merging the heavens and the earth, merging, the divine and the mundane. And that would be hopefully something that would allow for the crops to grow, for business to flourish, and for society in general to be successful in the coming year. So this was something that was done every year. And so if you think forward, you count on your hand. So the Super Bowl takes place early February. So we're going month to month. So March is 1, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November. November is 9 months, harvest season. So 9 months from the Super Bowl, roughly, we get the time of the harvest, Halloween, October, November. So it is like a fertility ritual, and then hopefully we have a good harvest come harvest season. I think that's really what it is. These old rituals and these old stories are not confined to some dusty book in a library. Powerful people today, whatever the reason might be, they might be evil, they might not be evil, who knows? They engage in these kinds of rituals because I would think that a lot of this is generational, but I would also think that a lot of this is like people like us. We're interested in it, we learn about it, and hell, if I was in a position of power and I had a giant ego, I'd probably try to do everything I could to maintain that power. And once you blackmail, maybe you kill somebody, whatever the situation is, eventually you get to, or maybe it starts with this, you get to, we're going to perform these magical rituals. I mean, hell, the New Orleans Saints hired voodoo priestesses to help them win a playoff game. And that's not even like a theory. That was just something they did 25 years ago. So if a football team does it and some Eagles fan is poking a Mahomes doll in the stands, what's going to stop Wall Street from doing it? What's going to stop the White House from doing it? You know what I mean?
Right. And
that's how I see it.
That's something that goes back into that initial question of like, how do you prove this to people?
Yeah.
Because it's seemingly so, like you're saying, like these pagan practices that they're bringing back into fruition. And there must be that belief that if I don't do this, bad things will happen. Right.
Yeah.
And so there's a group of people that are thinking this, and that's why they're performing these ancient, rituals to gods. Right. And you have to wonder what happens if they don't do it.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, is there something to this? Oh,
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Say that again.
Oh, no, I'm just saying, is there something to this where if they stop doing these rituals, something bad might happen?
Well, they might believe that, and
Right.
maybe it would. And is that because of psychology, or is it because of something supernatural, or is it both? And those are very good questions to ask and things to ponder. And I ask the same kinds of questions. The people that actually do this kind of stuff, do they really believe it? Is it just a generational thing? Is it something that happens when you get into government, or you get high enough up in government? I mean, you just look at things like Cynthia McKinney and what she said about the Israeli control of our Congress. And
Right.
look at people like Madison Cawthorn. He gets into office. Yeah, Republicans and Democrats, they both invited me to a drug-fueled, sex-fueled orgy. Both parties. And then he's gone from Congress. I mean, that is probably what happens. We have enough people that have told us that's what's going on. There's a lot of disinformation about it. But I would assume that within that, yes. And I don't blame it on Masons or something like that. I'm just simply saying that there is a religion that is practiced by very, very influential, powerful people, whether they're born into it or whether they just adopt it. Like people like you and I doubt that any of us were born into something like this. We just found an interest in it and we started learning about it.
Well, and
and here we are.
It's the patterns, it's noticing the patterns, and there's certain patterns that just happen over and over and you can't ignore it. Like it's right in front of your face. And so when you're seeing Hexclad as a commercial and they have
I'm glad you pointed that out, by the way. I'm glad that you saw that because I haven't heard anybody else mention that except Clyde and I talked about it. But yes.
Right. Well, and so here we go. Let's just dive right into this, because this is a commercial that it's basically Gordon Ramsay, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you're starting out at Area 51. They invite Gordon Ramsay to walk through the hexagram, right? I guess.
That's right.
And the whole hallway is designed as a hexagram. But here on the stage, or on this desk, you have this egg that's shaped like Saturn. And they make
There's
sure
your Saturn egg, yeah.
They make sure to point it out as they fly by here. And, you have these little aliens that are doing stuff, and he's just kind of grabbing a pan. But even here, let's see what this woman mentions something that's egg-shaped. Listen to what she says here.
Durable but low friction, created to deal with a thick egg-like atmosphere.
An egg-like...
egg-like atmosphere. Yeah, that's Saturn, right?
Right. And then towards the end, you have this alien kind of doing this, the upward and the lower triangle, I guess. But you have Pete Davidson come in, and he's saying that all celebrities are aliens. I just noticed that this light was a hexagram as well. But he has this Iron Cross necklace. I don't know if you've seen that before.
Not up close. No, I didn't talk about that.
Well, here, let me try to get a closer picture of it. So that's an interesting story, because that necklace belonged to his father. Let me see here if I can find the actual necklace, but it looks like the Iron Cross here.
Mm-hmm.
So it's,
FDNY
8418. There was this big thing back in 2018 where he was giving his ex-girlfriend his father's necklace because she was seen walking around with it, but it was just a replica. But his father was 33 years old and died during 9/11. Pete Davidson.
Oh, okay. I felt like someone mentioned something about this to me. I didn't make a note of it. Okay.
Right. So I just thought that was very strange. Like, he's wearing this, and he wears that necklace all the time. So it's not like it being in the Super Bowl was a surprise because he wears it all the time.
Right.
But people were noticing it. I was seeing it kind of trend on Twitter that, oh, what's this necklace that he's wearing? I'm like, well, he's been wearing it for years because it belonged to his father, who was 33 when he died at 9/11. You know, so it's
well, I know that cross became very popular in the 13th century, for whatever that's worth, but primarily with the Knights Templar.
Correct.
The Nazis adopted it. It also has a very simple binary meaning. It's not just, the horizontal vertical line, but it's usually a black and white cross. So you get that duality and the polarity there. And when you bring those two forces together, you have the horizontal and vertical, you produce a third point in the middle, or the nexus point, which produces the offspring, or it's the crossroads by which something is invoked or pulled through. So that particular symbol, a basic cross, has all of those pretty universal generalized meanings that all, once again, connect to Saturn and Inanna and all the things that we've been discussing tonight.
Well, and if you look at the colors of, the Knights Templar, it's what, black and red, or black, white, and red, right? And then you have the Super Bowl. It was all, well, I guess it was the black, white, and red and blue, but typically it's really just black and white. That's all I see. And then they throw in some red here and there, with, there was a couple of Super Bowls ago, you had 50 Cent hanging upside down, right? He was,
I remember that. Yeah.
In all the red room, and everything else was black and white. Another thing that I noticed was volcanoes. So this is another thing that Donut pointed out, in the Mountain Dew commercial. You had this donut, or sorry, not donut. You had this volcano exploding in the background, right? But I also noticed that there were several other commercials,
The Ram RHO for
like
a
this
little
one,
joyride.
the Dodge Ram, where he flies over a volcano. And then this one, the Reese's Peanut Butter, the big cup, where people
don't eat lava.
Yeah, like they want to eat the lava,
Yeah, Clyde mentioned, I'm not sure how much detail he went into, but Clyde mentioned this in regard to the Fox broadcast commercial, where they had all of the wildfires, floods, and probably tornadoes, hurricanes as stock footage or B-roll or something. And they were talking about Fox News will be there to document it. And it kind of gave him the impression that this is, obviously that's how the news makes their money and gets people to watch and listen because of all the destructive things that are happening.
Right.
But you're right on track with what I was thinking too, because I took what Clyde said and I mentioned to him on the show that we had done together that the beginning of the Super Bowl, right before it began, they had a moment of silence for the floods, fires, and for the plane crash victims. And you had a set of 3. Now, I'm not cavalier with the use of the number 3, 13 or 33, but it's very interesting that this was the 3-peat chance,
right,
for the Chiefs, right? And Patrick Mahomes is 3rd MVP, or he's had 3 MVPs at the Super Bowl, and the fleur-de-lis, which is the symbol of New Orleans, is 3 points, and actually has a connection to Inanna as well. So you put all that together with the 3s, and I started thinking, kind of like you referenced the fact that there was, there's these things with the eggs that are happening before the Super Bowl. Right. If you go back just a few years, last year, the year before, and so on, you do find a lot of bizarre, very common or very similar and a common theme throughout the last couple of years, where you have aviation incidents, UFO crashes. Go back to the Kobe Bryant death, all right before the Super Bowl. Last year, you had that Valentine's Day massacre. You had that Super Bowl Super Bowl celebration Valentine's massacre. So there's a ritualistic almost feel of a blood sacrifice in relation to the invocation, in relation to the fertility. And there's a historical precedent for that, because some cultures, not all, but some cultures, for example, would practice sympathetic magic, and they would take blood, which is menstruation blood, probably more so than not, and they would sprinkle it on the fields, because the menstruation blood was a symbol of fertility. And so if you transfer that fertility from the woman to the field, sympathetic magic, maybe the fields become fertile. It's the same reason the kings or the queens would have sex in the field or as part of a ritual to ensure fertility. So you got a blood sacrifice, you got the Super Bowl, and you have the imagery of all those things we talked about, fertility, the building of the physical world, and then the Lady Gaga stuff, Abracadabra.
Yeah.
And then you have things that sometimes happen after the Super Bowl as well. And you put all that together, and yeah, that's what it looks like to me. And I don't necessarily think it's something that's all planned. I think that if you were to look back, or if you were to get on a time machine and go back into history, and you were to find, a gladiator event and watch it, you could probably find very similar things happening then that you see happening now. And it might not be because it's planned. It's just kind of how things develop, because no matter where you are in the world, you see the sun. No matter where you are in the world, you see the moon. So humans come up with very similar ideas, concepts, symbols, and meanings for things that we all universally see and interact with. And that's why most myths are cross-relatable and comparable. So that, just to be objective, that might be why you see so much of this. It's not so much that it's planned. It's just, it's a byproduct of human creativity, if you will. Because if someone asked me, they said, "Hey, Ryan, can you design a Super Bowl halftime show for us?" Yeah, I could. And it wouldn't be because I'm in the Illuminati. It'd just be because I read a bunch of books on symbols. You know what I mean?
All right. No, and like with the volcano stuff, I just wasn't sure if that meant, watch out for a volcano explosion soon. Because,
or just disaster in general.
Well, yeah. I mean, but look what was in the news just yesterday. You have Kilauea volcano in Hawaii spews lava 330 feet into the sky. This thing has been erupting, I believe, 9 times since December.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
But a very 330 feet, just on the money there.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, just on the money with the number there, right?
That's an interesting find. Yeah. So some people, and I'm glad that you said it's been erupting, because some people might say, "Oh, look, they predicted it." It's like, no, it's been erupting, but it's part of the idea of all these natural disasters. And of course, the media pushes climate change. Other people push other things, but yeah, disaster. But disaster, think about it like this: disasters, natural or otherwise, in Greece were personified as deities. They were called the Titans. And and the Titans, actually, we find the Titans, as soon as Trump got in office, he unleashed the Titans. And by Titans, I mean 2 things. I mean the Titans of industry, Larry Ellison, Sam Altman, both Israelis. And they have 2 companies that are called Oracle and OpenAI. 2 things that we saw at the Super Bowl, a lot of. The Oracle of Delphi, Philadelphia. We saw the OpenAI, all the AI commercials, ChatGPT, Starlink, etc. And those 2 companies, those are the titans of industry, but they're also titans in another way. They're working with another company, not just SoftBank. They're working with a company called NVIDIA. And NVIDIA is a huge company, massive global company.
Right.
NVIDIA
just ask Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. NVIDIA is literally named after, well, it's a Latin name, and it's in Greek they call it Nemesis, but it's the god of chaos and the god of the evil eye, open an eye. It's the god of the evil eye. It's a god of chaos, and it's a god or a deity who the Greeks would refer to as a titan. Titans of industry, and companies that as titans of industry also are named after literal titans in the mythological record. So though you can think about it like that too, we're thinking about disasters, but disasters can happen in ways that are not like volcanoes, earthquakes, hurricanes. Disasters can also happen in economic ways, social ways. And when you have companies, just like you have things happening with volcanoes and other things like that, you have companies named after titans. Well, the titans in one capacity or another have been unleashed from inside the earth and are free to roam around. If anybody wants a good explanation for that, just watch that movie Hades, that Disney movie Hades, where they unleash the titans from inside the earth.
Yeah, and that's ultimately the concern with AI, is the granddaddy of all granddaddy conspiracies to me is that the Nephilim or fallen angels need a body, and they're building AI to give them bodies. And I don't know how that works or, whether that even makes sense, but it's a fascinating story that I'm following. And when you're saying things like open AI and we have Stargate and we have this trans-dimensional verbiage being floated around, it just it makes you wonder, are they trying to invoke something or bring something back to life? And I mean, when you look at the Super Bowl and you're saying the rituals and stuff, one of the first commercials, the first movie commercials, was Jurassic World Rebirth.
That's right, yeah.
And then
they played that several times, I think.
Right, and so you're like, rebirth of what? And then you have Mission Impossible, The Final Reckoning, and Donald Trump was saying this is our final battle, which happens to be the same terminology used by Albert Pike to describe the Third World War, right? And
you know how that transpires, right?
Yeah.
Muslims, Christians go to war with each other and they destroy each other. That's exactly what Israel is going to lead this country into.
So it's, and you're wondering what's really happening here. And the sacrifice angle, just down on Bourbon Street, just, at the beginning of the year, there was that terrorist who drove over everybody. Where did they open up the Super Bowl? It was on Bourbon Street. Oops. I have a video here. I didn't want to play the audio, but it's Lady Gaga performing on Bourbon Street. This is when you were probably making your avocado dip or your guacamole. But
that was her open song with her magic circle.
Right. She performed in a black platform with a white circle, almost like a chalk or a salt circle, I don't know.
She's done that at Super Bowls. In fact, they use that circle. They use that circle at the Grammys too. Did you see the Grammys stage and all that?
Right. Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I don't know if I could explain it to you to pull it up fast enough. I could pull it up on my phone probably. Where is it at? Well, two things actually. Here is, if you can see on the video, that was pregame at the Super Bowl. That's the NFL logo surrounded by wings. That's the wing disc or the golden,
like an eagle.
Golden sun disc, right? And that was just before the game. And then there is, that's going to kill me if I don't find, oh, here it is. I found it. So this is the Grammys. Is it the Grammys? What's that? Magic circle, piano. That looks like a Stargate.
Right. Yes. We talked about
which is the name of the program that Trump has. So
exactly. Yeah. So it's all like the trends. You know what I'm saying? Like the trends of everything fitting together. You have this build up of this cathartic moment of the clash of the Titans in the Caesar Dome. The green and the red. What do you think about the colors? Does the color, because you were saying blue means that you're getting ready to bring something forth, right? Like a water bringing forth life. I think that's what you said.
Well, yeah, blue is usually the color associated with the inverted triangle because it's like a cup or a womb or, the Holy Grail, for example. But yes.
So what do you think about like the Chiefs and the Eagles, the color combination? Is there any symbolism there?
Are you asking about the conspiracy logo or are you asking just in general about colors?
Just in general. Just in general.
Yeah, well, so, I mean, we could actually tie it to that logo conspiracy. I don't buy that at all because last year it wasn't accurate and people keep pulling a Taylor Swift dress to match up with the logo, which is, I think, a little ridiculous. But in terms of colors, I mean, if you look at the NFL teams, like if you pulled up a list of all the teams, you're going to find that a lot of them have red, a lot of them have, blue. So these are pretty common colors, right? If you want to use the colors in context with everything else, then sure, we can try to find a meaning if there is one, even if it's just a kind of a random natural meaning. But I mean, if you have red is the lowest wavelength. Red is associated with Saturn.
Right.
The Chiefs, I've called the Chiefs the secret Chiefs, right? Because they're they're defeated by the Eagles. The Eagles, Philadelphia, America defeats the deep state. The secret chiefs that are passing Blavatsky and Alice Bailey and the Golden Dawn, all this secret information. So yeah, red is associated as a color with Saturn. It's usually associated with evil. You alluded to that yourself because that you see that in Star Wars and so many other, or even death, because in Star Trek all the guys with red die first, right? Mm-hmm. So it's usually associated with death. as for the Eagles, I mean, what is that? Is that green? Is it blue? Is it turquoise? What is their? Are they considered green?
The Eagles, yes, yeah, they're green.
So green is green is pretty obvious. I think it's generally and universally fertility, like the green man, the green god. Osiris is the green god. So I think it's fertility. So fertility conquers Saturn, who is death. So life conquers death. It would be my interpretation of the colors in relation to the halftime and the commercials. Life conquers death.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I never even thought about that. Yeah, I know that, I just think of red and green as Christmas, and I'm like, this is weird. I don't know if this has anything. But yeah, like,
well, that's what Christmas is. Christmas is a celebration of greenery. Quite literally. That's what all the green trees, the fir trees, the pine trees, evergreens. That's what it's all about. It's about venerating nature, green things over death. But red doesn't always mean death. Red can also mean life, because red is menstrual blood. That's why the Japanese flag is white with a red dot. Its symbol in Japan, it actually has many meanings. It represents the rising sun, of course. So you have the blood, menstrual blood. You also have the birthing blood. So there's blood during birth. Mm-hmm. So the land of the rising sun, the birthing sun. But red in Japan also is a symbol, kind of like the bindi dot that the Hindus wear.
Right.
Red is a symbol of consciousness, or the spirit, the fiery spirit that exists in all of us. So you could look at it in a lot of ways, but that's what Christmas is. It's about preserving that spirit, that fire, and hoping it doesn't go out, protecting it before the winter can fully take hold.
Right. No, I've listened to plenty of shows of yours where you kind of describe seasonality, Christmas, the coming of the four horsemen described as the seasons changing. There's so much symbolism in the Bible that has to do with either fertility or just the changing of seasons.
Yes, exactly. Which is what we talked about with Inanna. That's what a lot of that is. It's fertility, the changing of the seasons, the crops, the harvest 9 months after the impregnation, the rituals, and yeah.
Awesome.
Nature magic.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting, and that's something why I wanted to have you on. I think that this was a great breakdown. I know you got to go. You got a lot of stuff on your plate, so I wanted to thank you again for coming on the show, Ryan. Flex, before we get out of here, did you have any questions or anything?
Listen, this was a lesson for me. That's why I was sitting, because I love to learn from all this, from all the stuff. Like I say, when on the other podcast, when we have guests, I'm the superficial guy. I always talk about the stuff that's up top, but I like just to listen and hear about all this stuff, because I think, up until 2020, when I wasn't awake, I just thought it was football. I thought it was just, a halftime show and some star putting out a new album. But now in the last 4 years and shows just like this, I've been able to really sit back and look, and it's a history lesson, which is extremely important, because I think we still have people out there that just don't realize that the world is run by satanic psychopaths, could I say, but they are. And, hopefully we can open people's eyes up to it and see it. And I don't know what this holds for us down the road. I'm still going to watch Super Bowls and look for symbolism and who's being dissed. But, other than that, I think it's just all a distraction to something bigger coming.
Right. So, again, Ryan, you're the man. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for explaining the deeper symbolism found in the Super Bowl. I know there's always an exoteric and an esoteric, so you did a really good job of explaining what was in between the cracks and what people weren't really seeing and what they should pay attention to. I do have the links in this YouTube description, and I'm going to send this out on audio for the secretteachings.info, and then also the link to your Apple Podcasts. But where can people find you and support you?
Yeah, so tstradio.info. It has the free archive, which currently is distributed to Apple and any other platform you can think of via Spreaker. However, due to some censorship issues, Spreaker is fine, but I might have to switch Spreaker over and to something else and get a new payment processor. So right now, as of this show, just tstradio.info, the article article archive, all the stuff that's usually for subscribers. I might even make it free for a while I transition everything over. So as long as you go to the website, it's very clearly set up, very easy to use. You'll find the show, or if you just like to search on your phone, just type in TST Radio on Apple, etc., and you should be able to pull the show up. But if you have any issues with it in the next couple of weeks, I'm trying to update it, so don't freak out and think I quit radio. It'll be there eventually.
Gotcha. All right.
Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yes, anytime. Yeah, it's been 2 years, so yeah, I'm glad to have you back. And we got to do this again. We were just saying before the show started, we got to do a deeper dive into some uncomfortable topics, but we can do that on a later date. So yes, everybody out there, I hope you enjoyed the show. Go support Ryan. The links are in the description. Go sign up for his podcast. And yeah, if you do make any of those episodes for free, there's a lot of episodes for free on Apple. So just go check them out. But yeah, do what you can to support Ryan. And everybody, until next time, sayonara.